we see is Paul's plan. Paul's plan. When these things were accomplished, Paul purposed in the Spirit, and then you see the plan coming after that. I'd like to reflect for a moment on Paul's plan as he purposed in the Spirit. I believe that we all need to be challenged to seek greater spiritual purpose. Paul is purposing in the Spirit here. What that means is he's strategizing in the Spirit. He's planning in the Spirit. He's proposing to do something because the Spirit is leading him to do so. I thought it was good enough for Paul. Is it good enough for us? To purpose in the Spirit. Now, I think this is important, friends, because I think we sometimes lack a sense of spiritual purpose. When was the last time that you and I purposed in the Spirit, had a plan to do something, maybe as a congregation, or maybe as a family, maybe as an individual? Let's just explore what this might look like, what I believe this does look like. First of all, a spiritual purpose is not self-centered, but Spirit-centered. So I need to be clear about that, because Paul didn't just come up with some plan that would serve his benefit, saying, I'd like to go such and such and such and such and such and such place. No, he's purposing in the Spirit. He's purposing or strategizing in the Spirit. Now this is so important because every one of us here has likes and dislikes about the ministry here. Let's be honest, right? Likes and dislikes. We have ideas. We have perhaps some goals or some sense of what should be happening here as a church. But that's not really what's being talked about here. What's being talked about is spiritual purposing. Purposing the Spirit means that your purposes are in line with those that the Spirit has outlined in Scripture. Purposing in the Spirit means praying for the Spirit's guidance in making plans. And what happened here was that Paul realized that one of the phases of his work had been accomplished in Ephesus. The Spirit sent him to Ephesus, but now he realizes that plan is fulfilled. So he says, in the Spirit, praying in the Spirit, getting confirmation from the Word of the Spirit, I purpose to go on to Macedonia and then ultimately to Rome, perhaps even ultimately to Spain. But he's now planning to expand on his accomplishments. So first of all, a spiritual purpose is not self-centered. It's not a reflection of my likes or dislikes for the ministry of the church. It's Spirit-centered. And then secondly, a spiritual purpose is concrete. It's concrete. It means it has substance to it. Let me demonstrate the difference. Paul didn't just say, I'd like to see this ministry grow. That's not concrete, is it? That's not concrete. He didn't just say, I'd like to see the church expand. Now, I think every one of us would be able to say things like that. Right? I'd like to see more things happening in the church. Or I'd like to see God doing more work. Or I'd like to see the church grow or whatever. That's not what Paul's doing here. Paul lays out a plan. Macedonia and Achaia to Jerusalem to Rome. All right, so a spiritual purpose is concrete. We're not spiritually purposing unless we're proposing a plan. And then thirdly, a spiritual purpose requires action. Notice what it says here. After he gives a spiritual purpose, in verse 22 he says, so he sent into Macedonia two of those who ministered to him, Timothy and Erastus. So Paul says, I purpose in the Spirit to go to Macedonia. Therefore he sent these two brothers into Macedonia to prepare his plan, to put it into motion. Spiritual purposing requires action. Now, let's all consider this question, please, for the honor and glory of Christ and for the benefit of this church. What are our spiritual purposes? What are we proposing in the Spirit? And as we think about these things, could I ask you, would you share them? What a benefit, what a blessing to have any number of people in a congregation sharing spiritual purposes. What are your concerns about this church? I know you have them. I know I have them. We have concerns. We have ideas, perhaps. What are our desires? What are our visions? We need to be laying these things before the Lord. We need to be praying. And then we need to be communicating these things, I believe, to the leadership of the church. It grieves me. Please take this with a grain of salt if it doesn't pertain to you. But it grieves me. And I know it grieves the elders as well, and I believe it grieves the Lord to hear about people's complaints about the church when there's nothing resembling spiritual purposing. Just dissatisfaction with such and such and such and such. Spiritual purposing looks something like this. For each one of us to say, I believe God would be more honored if we explored this particular course of action in our church, and here's how I would like to help. I believe God would be more honored if we explored this particular course of action in our church, and here's how I would like to help. I see that as a reflection of what's happened here in Acts 19, 21, and 22. It's spiritual purposing. Right? It's essential to a vibrant ministry.